Horns up. Come on in. Thought today we would go back to the 1960s or the 1890s or the 1990s. I don't know where we're going, but where we're going to go geographically is that if you followed the directions in yesterday's clue, you would have ended up at Carnegie Hall. And
Start again.
we're starting again. So we're talking about Carnegie Hall. If you saw the first part of the thing before interruption, we're having some funky weather or uh, technology issues today, but we're talking about Carnegie Hall. And Carnegie Hall, that most famous music venue, so famous in fact that it had enough to have a Jeopardy joke made about it. How do you get to Carnegie Hall, Alex? Auto tune? No, practice was the answer to that. It was built in 1891 by the steel magnate Andrew Carnegie. So there's a lot of steel in that building as well. It opened with a capacity in the main hall of 2,804 people. Lots of famous people played there. Mark Twain spoke there for his last public appearance was in 1906 there. Judy Garland recorded her famous live album there. Lots and lots of jazz artists played there. Bill Haley played there for the first rock and roll to play there. But the most important gig to us there, of course, is when the Beatles played there at Carnegie Hall in 1964, just after the Ed Sullivan Show. And can you imagine seeing the Beatles there in a venue that just a couple of thousand people? In fact, can you imagine? I believe in this crowd somewhere right there is one of the folks watching right now. I believe Irene is in this group. One of my fellow fans on the run actually got to attend that Carnegie Hall, and what a thrill that must have been. But this story moves on to another event there at the Carnegie Hall, and that would be the New York premiere of the Liverpool Oratorio. And as you probably know, Paul was commissioned by the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra to celebrate their anniversary with the Liverpool Oratorio, a very special piece of music they commissioned to have Paul write for their anniversary. And he got a fellow to help him with the composition by the name of Carl Davis. And Carl and Paul worked together to do the composition and the structure of the piece of music called the Oratorio. And the day of the Oratorio's premiere in New York, the fans were all gathered at the stage door of Carnegie Hall hopefully to see Paul arrive. And just across the street from the stage entrance there is a little deli, and we walked across to get some coffee, and who did we run into but Carl Davis himself, and happened to have this sheet of the page of the newspaper with me that had covering had Paul on the cover covering the event there at the Carnegie Hall, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind signing that. He looked a little surprised that anybody would recognize him because he was just in street clothes, but we knew how you could see he wrote his name there, and actually even added a couple of little eyeglasses to Paul and said something like he hoped that Paul wouldn't mind a little fun with that, because he said that volunteered that Paul was really fun to work with there, so he signed that piece for me. And this actually is a display card. You can see how it's kind of punched out a little bit and never folded that back, but this was a display card for the retail sales for the Liverpool Oratorio. And the Oratorio itself was so beautiful. Got to see a classical piece performed there in that room, literally designed for that type of music. An Oratorio has some very specific requirements that the musicians and the composers needed to stick to. It is nothing but music and lyrics. Can't be any costumes, can't be any scenery, can't be any action to act out the words of the lyrics. So it was literally just a study in music. They had the Harlem Boys Choir was provided the background vocals, and a full symphony orchestra playing the work that Carl and Paul had composed together. We did get a picture of Paul as Paul finally arrived. We didn't see him come in for the rehearsals or anything in the afternoon, but you can see him there arriving for the evening performance. And also, they sold a program at the at Carnegie Hall at the event itself that has the details of the singers and the libretto, all the lyrics for the beautiful piece of music. A little bit of history about the work and Paul's involvement, and even a parody of the Sgt. Pepper cover from another musical classic from the Polytechnic there. Carl at the end of the show, wasn't really taking a lot of pictures in there that night, but at the end of the program, I got one very decent photo of Paul with big smile on his face as he was accepting flowers there at the end. I like that photo because it shows the fans' hands down at the bottom, and this lady that was in the orchestra, just a glowing smile on her face there. And of course, Paul looks just radiant himself there, certainly proud of the reception that he was getting for that piece of music. The piece of music actually got the oratorio itself got a really good commercial reception. It went directly to the top of the classic charts and stayed there for several weeks, and even got into the top 200 of the regular album charts. So it was a commercial success. The critics were lukewarm at best, and some were rather unpleasant with it. The worst review I remember reading just focused on the word unnecessary. But a lot of it was long, it was slow, it was a little dreary music at times, but there were still several really beautiful segments in the show that included a couple of pieces that were brought off the album for singles. Save the Child is a freestanding song by itself, and The World You're Coming Into is a really nice ballad. And of course, the work itself is almost well over an hour and a half long, and beautiful, pleasant music. A few years after that event in New York, Carl was doing an event in Atlanta. Actually, he was doing some conducting of a music tribute to James Bond, and he was working with the Atlanta Symphony, and I arranged an interview with him and got to sit and chat with him one night after the performance. Went to the James Bond event to see that, and was supposed to do the interview after the event, and walked up and introduced myself, talked to him about doing the interview, and he was very tired and seemed busy, and he was looked like he was going to basically refuse the interview, and he said, "What are you doing about 10 in the morning? How would you like to have breakfast with me?" So he invited me to his hotel, and we sat and had a nice long chat, and he talked very lovingly about Paul. A couple of things he said that actually didn't make it to the print of the interview. This interview that we ran here with Carl talked about more what he had been doing in the year or two since the oratorio, but a couple of things, it was just fascinating to hear him talk about how Paul was very childlike when he would bring his tunes in. He would literally have them maybe on a guitar or just in his head, and he would hum the bits and pieces to Carl, and they would figure out how to make to present it for a symphony work like this for the oratorio. And a couple of things he said that he was routinely having to remind Paul of the restrictions of what the definition of the oratorio was. Paul a couple of times wanted to have maybe a spoken bit in the storyline, and or at one point have a couple of people in costumes or actors come out and portray a couple of the scenes in the storyline. And Carl said he kind of had keep reminding him that that would not qualify as an actual oratorio, and if he also wouldn't meet the definition or the what he had been commissioned to provide for the Liverpool Orchestra as well. So he kind of kept reeling him in. And another thing he was talking about enjoying working with Paul was Paul was always looking for the single from the music that he was writing there. And Carl was saying something to the effect, Handel might have had the Messiah, but Handel never had a single. And so he was encouraging the thought of having maybe a top 10 record or a single from the oratorio was a special part of the process for him. Carl, during our breakfast, he did sign the oratorio program for me here at in the front page, and I did ask him to sign the vinyl outside of the vinyl as well. Something else I was going to point out, a couple of the odd CD singles that were released. This little 3-inch CD single from Japan is an oddity that goes with the collectibles that go with the oratorio, and something that I really, one aspect of this, the whole oratorio, that's true too. I asked him if I could take a picture to go with the article, and he said, how about just taking one as I sign your program here, that'll look a little more casual. He seemed, Carl had, I could tell he had a little mischief in his personality there. He seemed a little impish and enjoyed having some fun with some of the questions that I was asking him there, and we had a fun chat. And something else he was talking about too, the fact that this effort of Paul's and now his continuing Standing Stone, the ballet, even something like Love, Cirque du Soleil in Las Vegas, all these higher art elements of taking the Beatles music to a place where it will indeed. I've had a bumper sticker similar to this on my car since I've been driving, and the phrase "Beatles Forever." Things like this take the Beatles music beyond. We've got the first generation fans. We've got the torch, and probably some of the folks watching right now weren't even alive when this story happened. I've got some folks, some friends, hopefully some viewers that less than that's almost 30 years old. So I love the fact that something like this, and the fact that the oratorio is still being performed. This is a little poster from the Florida premiere, and the Tampa Orchestra played this in '94, and the fact that this legitimatizes this music, so we'll be able to have it. I love the fact that I'm able to share some of these stories, these experiences, and the photos and things like this. The shared experience of going to a concert. I'm missing going to a concert right now, but we'll be back on the run again soon, I hope. And certainly with some good news today. And we've got a chance to be able to have this shared experience literally live forever, and the Beatles Forever phrase will be more than just a bumper sticker. And hope you kind of enjoyed this little chat with Carl Davis, and talking about an unusual, or a little, like I call a higher art level of Beatles music and Beatles fandom. And we've decided to pull the shows back to only Tuesdays now. We didn't get nearly all the things done. I took last week off to do some projects, didn't get nearly as much done as we had hoped that we would. So I'm only going to do the shows on Tuesday for a while now, and we'll still alternate one encounter show and one memorabilia program every other week like that. And I really appreciate you folks watching and commenting and staying with us here on the Live at 5 from my Beatles collection room. Okay, so we'll see you next Tuesday. Remember, peace and love and science.